today on the CTV News at 5, under new management.
I think this is good news for Canada.
As questions arise over how XL Foods was run in the past. Plus, no dogs allowed at the Lethbridge Animal Shelter because of a mysterious respiratory illness. And in sports, the Hurricanes blow out the Wheaties 6-1 at the NMAX.
CTV News with Jackie Scantlebury.
Good afternoon. Cautious optimism. That's the reaction to news that the XL beef plant in Brooks will soon be run by the world's largest beef processing company. JBS, based in Brazil and the U.S., is taking over day-to-day operations 3 weeks after the plant was shut down because of a nationwide E. coli outbreak. JBS will also have the option to buy the Brooks plant, as well as XL's Calgary facilities and feedlots. Meantime, federal food inspectors are still trying to figure out when the plant can reopen. The cattle industry says today's takeover is good for Alberta's beef industry.
JBS is a very aggressive company. They compete head-on-head with the largest beef processors around the world. So they're going to want as many cattle as they can coming out of Alberta feedlots through their packing plant. They don't want to give 1 day relaxation to the Cargill plant in High River.
Now, the workers' union is hoping the new management team will clean house, especially for the 2,000 plant workers impacted by temporary layoffs. The union representing the workers also says the deal is a good thing, not just for the workers, but also for the Nielsen brothers, who own XL Foods. The union feels the brothers got in over their heads, and this will give the plant a chance to survive and be in a good facility in the future. The union is also hoping for a better working relationship with the company.
They wouldn't agree to engineered or a industrial engineer to come in and do a study of food so that we knew food safety and worker safety was okay. So, we're hoping that we can establish those kinds of relationships with JBS. And, somebody said, well, look, you've ruined your relationship with XL because of the comments you made. Well, we never had a relationship to ruin.
Meanwhile, there's troubling new information about how XL was run in the past. Stunning lapses in the way that it handled beef has been uncovered by a CTV News investigation. CTV's Ottawa Bureau Chief Robert Fife has more.
When American food inspectors head to Brooks, Alberta next week, they'll be following up on years of health concerns about XL Foods stretching back more than a decade. CTV News has learned other XL meatpacking plants in Calgary had been shut out of the U.S. market on multiple occasions for health hazards since 2001. U.S. Agriculture Department audits reveal XL Foods had continual problems with sanitation and E. coli tainted meat. Ottawa was forced repeatedly to press XL owners Brian and Lee Nielsen to clean up their facilities. In 2001, one plant in Calgary allowed fecal contamination on carcasses. In 2003, another facility had rust in the boning room, flaking paint in the coolers. Yet another had tubs that weren't cleaned and hooks that still had meat and fat on them from the previous day. Two of the facilities were delisted by the U.S. for more than a year.
We're realizing that these companies have a long history of bad behavior and nobody's calling them to account.
A 2005 audit worried about pests getting into the Calgary slaughterhouse. In 2006, blood and other liquids were dripping into edible meat. 2 years later, U.S. inspectors discovered pipes filled with blood and dirt.
It's entirely unacceptable that Canadians would be less informed than Americans.
The agency says Canada's food inspection system isn't broken, but more attention needs to be focused on sanitation and hygiene.
Okay, Dory Rossiter, a cool down for the weekend. We're talking even down to 2 degrees.
Yeah, and we're talking the snow word as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday. That's when the target days for us to start to see that precipitation and the overnight lows to be cold enough that it turns into some flurry activity. But I'll tell you all about it in a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Dory. Occupational health and safety inspectors are continuing an investigation into the death of a worker at a North Lethbridge tire shop. A 35-year-old man was killed at Mo Tires in the 2800 block of 5th Avenue North when he was pinned against a building by a forklift yesterday. Investigators have been interviewing witnesses or co-workers, checking the forklift and taking photographs and measurements at the scene. The investigation is still in the early stages, but an OHS spokesman says they can release some basic information.
Yesterday at around 1:30, a worker was stealing a forklift when he was pinned to the door of the shed by the forklift. The worker was transported to hospital by EMS, where he was pronounced deceased. OHS was called and came to the scene and was on site yesterday investigating. And they have issued a stop use order on the forklift, and the investigation is ongoing.
Occupational Health and Safety has up to 2 years to submit a report on the incident to Alberta Justice, and from there the Crown will decide whether charges are warranted. A surprise turn of events today at the sentencing of a Medicine Hat day home operator for the death of a little girl. Erin Jackman was to be sentenced today for the death of 19-month-old Mercedes Pepper. Mercedes died of blunt force trauma to her head at Jackman's home in July of 2010. Jackman was charged with manslaughter, but last month she pleaded guilty to criminal negligence causing death. Today, her sentencing was put off at the very last moment. Jackman originally told police Mercedes fell and hit her head while playing. She later confessed to police that she pushed her into a door while trying to force her into a timeout. Jackman will be sentenced in 2 weeks. And a Cranbrook woman will stand trial for second-degree murder in the drowning death of a toddler she was babysitting. A judge has determined there is enough evidence to try 29-year-old Tammy Bouvette on charges of second-degree murder. Bouvette is charged in the drowning death of 19-month-old Yana Teeple. The child was found unresponsive in the bathtub at Bouvette's home in May of last year, but it took several months for charges to be laid. A preliminary hearing wrapped up in August, but it took several weeks for the judge to decide there was enough evidence in the case to go to trial, and a trial date is expected to be set November the 19th. No dogs allowed. The Lethbridge Animal Shelter is under quarantine tonight as vets and staff work to control a rapidly spreading respiratory illness. As Terry Vogt reports, all adoptions are now on hold and no new dogs are being brought into the shelter.
The Lethbridge Animal Shelter is closed, and staff are in the process of cleaning and sterilizing the kennels. This after a dozen dogs came down with an unknown respiratory disorder.
The animal shelter was opened in 2004 and it was designed to try and mitigate spreading disease. So what I mean by that is we have different areas of the kennels that have different ventilation systems. In this instance, it appears that there's dogs that have symptoms in all of the areas of the animal shelter.
For now, all adoptions have been halted and the shelter will not be accepting any strays. That could put pressure on other organizations that take in stray or unwanted pets. Lethbridge Humane Society says it can't help much because its kennels are already full.
I hope they would take them to another rescue. I mean, there are several around. They're in the phone book. Don't let them go run out. Don't take them to the country and let them run. That would not be a good thing.
If people do find dogs, we ask that if they have the potential to hold on to the dog for a little while, that certainly will help.
For the time being, city officials are urging people to use traditional methods of finding a pet's rightful owner, posting information on Kijiji or Pet Finder, or putting up a poster in the neighborhood. Right now, a vet is treating 2 of the dogs, but they're still not exactly sure what they're dealing with. And a city spokesman says until they know what's causing the respiratory illness, they can't treat the other animals. The city says a priority is to create a clean, sterile area within the animal shelter so they can resume at least limited operations as soon as possible. Terry Vogt, CTV News, Lethbridge.
Now, cats are still being allowed at the city's animal shelter. Veterinarians will tell us that it will take a couple of days for the dogs' test results to be complete. However, that the animals that are being treated are responding positively. A group of Crow's Nest Pass residents say they have already exceeded the number of names needed for a petition asking the province to investigate the municipality's council. Organizers say they have well over the 1,200 names they need to represent the support of 20% of the eligible population. The group has been collecting signatures since council fired Blairmore's fire chief, which sparked nearly 100 firefighters to walk off the job in protest. A door-to-door campaign will continue next week, and some of the firefighters who resigned are setting up petition sites at public places. Organizers say they have until October 29th to collect the signatures. Alberta's premier is in Lethbridge today. Alison Redford will be speaking at the Southern Alberta Leaders Dinner program. The PC fundraiser gets underway at the Lethbridge Lodge, 6:30. Now this afternoon, Redford announced a significant addition to the Chinook Regional Hospital. We've got those details coming up in health. A group of Lethbridge firefighters and dispatchers were recognized today with service medals from the province and federal governments. 12 members of the fire and EMS department received exemplary service awards. The men weren't able to go to Edmonton to get the awards from the Lieutenant Governor earlier this year, so they were honored this morning. 4 dispatchers were among those presented with medals.
It's what's behind that medal is the person's dedication and commitment to serve their community. Often they'll have very difficult circumstances that they face, and mostly tragic circumstances. Occasionally we see the great positive things. Somebody, they might help deliver a baby or something like that. They have a successful rescue, and this is really about recognizing those folks.
In June, 32 firefighters from across southern Alberta were recognized for their distinguished service to the community. Time now for a look at the day's markets.